College life marks a period of burgeoning independence, forging new connections and friendships. For many, this time even leads to finding their lifelong partner. Sadly, not everyone gets to complete this significant chapter of their lives. Such was the tragic fate of Andrea DelVesco, whose life was cut short at the beginning of her final year at the University of California, Los Angeles. The subject of our story was born in Chicago, Illinois, USA, in 1994. She was the middle child to parents Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old when she arrived, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. They were a happy, loving family who relocated several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother studied finance and marketing at Southern Methodist University before working for American Airlines. She later served as a customer service manager in the mortgage department at Citibank. After the family grew, she left her career to become a homemaker. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets, owning a holding investment company. His endeavors ensured the family's prosperity and comfortable lifestyle. However, his success was not effortless. It was the direct result of his considerable hard work. The family's financial standing allowed all their children to attend university. Prior to that, they received their education at a private school with a rigorous academic curriculum taught by the state's top educators. From a young age, the children were encouraged to broaden their horizons, exploring everything from sports to religion, instilling in them strong moral values. Andrea excelled academically, participated in sports, and pursued a well-rounded development. She enjoyed visiting museums and immersing herself in art. Furthermore, she possessed a kind and empathetic nature, often deeply connecting with the problems of those around her. She shared a particularly close bond with her mother, who dedicated herself to creating a warm home environment. The family traveled extensively from Andrea's early years, further broadening her perspective and exposing her to diverse people and cultures. As Andrea matured, she became a source of immense pride and hope for her parents. Her younger sister looked up to her, and her brother spoke of her with great pride. In 2012, upon graduating from high school, Andrea applied to several educational institutions. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was already enrolled, and Andrea initially favored this option. However, she decided to wait for all her acceptance letters before making a final decision. Ultimately, she chose to major in psychology at the University of California, Los Angeles. This university was recognized among America's top institutions in 2022 and had always been highly regarded as prestigious, boasting highly qualified faculty and a robust scientific and technological infrastructure. This array of strengths dispelled any remaining doubts her family had. However, attending UCLA necessitated a move to the vibrant city of Los Angeles. While her parents were thrilled with her choice of university and fully supported her decision, they worried about her being so far away and alone, without her brother to look out for her. With her family's encouragement, Andrea embarked on her new life. Upon arriving, she was tasked with selecting a campus club to join. These clubs, often referred to as fraternities and sororities, offered opportunities to build lasting friendships and receive support from more experienced students. Membership typically involved a vetting process and a small fee. Student communities were known for their strong camaraderie, with entire sections of campus hosting large parties that spanned multiple residences. Many students lived so openly that they rarely locked their doors, fostering an environment of easy access and constant interaction. While generally safe, even such environments could experience incidents. Andrea readily embraced membership in one of these organizations. She possessed a fantastic sense of humor, an attractive appearance, and an impeccable sense of style, which contributed to her popularity. She also showcased her creativity by sewing unique and flamboyant outfits that consistently captivated onlookers. Andrea crafted distinctive, vibrant looks that invariably made her the center of attention at any gathering. Beyond her social life, Andrea was a diligent student. After her first year, she secured a job as a paralegal assistant at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. However, the demanding schedule of this role proved incompatible with her studies, prompting her to seek alternative employment. She subsequently held several other part-time positions that allowed her to balance work and academics, providing her with personal funds and reducing her reliance on her parents. Her college life continued until 2015, the year of her anticipated graduation. Andrea dreamed of traveling after completing her education, with only her final year of study remaining. During this period, she resided in a dormitory building on campus, conveniently located just a 5-minute walk from the main academic buildings. It was an ideal setting for students, frequently hosting parties for both her sorority and the wider university. Here, Andrea lived not only with her friends and sorority sisters, but also with a small dog she had rescued from a shelter. She adored her little pet, even creating a dedicated social media page to share adorable photos of the dog. One day, the dog went missing, deeply upsetting Andrea. She was distraught and searched desperately for her beloved pet. Fortunately, the dog was found 5 days later. In September, Andrea was preparing to commence the final phase of her university education. Classes were scheduled to begin on September 24th, with the official start of the fall semester on the 21st. On the 19th, she posted a favorite music video on her social media page, likely unaware it would be her last. Just the following day, September 20th, 2015, marked the beginning of the last weekend before classes resumed. The sorority sisters were socializing on the balconies of their residential complex. Andrea and her friend Jessica spent organizational time for the sorority until 3 a.m. Jessica retired to her bedroom around 3:30 a.m., while Andrea settled on the sofa in the living room. However, sleep eluded her that night. A few hours later, another resident, Samantha, rushed to Andrea's door, shouting about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual for her, as she typically left her bedroom door accessible to her friends. This was common practice within the sorority. Samantha couldn't open the door and called for help from other residents. Together, they struggled to open the door, but the room was already engulfed in smoke and flames, preventing them from entering. They could see Andrea lying motionless on her bed, but their calls went unanswered. Recognizing the extreme danger, the students decided to evacuate the building. All the young women exited to safety. They immediately called emergency services at 911 to report the fire. The friends stood on the sidewalk awaiting assistance until fire trucks arrived at 7:10 a.m. Firefighters worked swiftly to contain the blaze, extending hoses to the second floor. The fire in Andrea's room had escalated intensely within just 15 minutes. However, the fire had been smoldering for a considerable period before reaching such intensity. Ultimately, 32 firefighters worked diligently and efficiently to extinguish the fire. Following the incident, rumors began circulating among students that Andrea DelVesco had perished in the fire, as she had not emerged from the burning building and had not been seen. Firefighters who eventually entered the structure discovered human remains on her bed. During their investigation into the circumstances, they concluded that the fire had originated in Andrea's bedroom, and her body was severely burned. However, the body's condition made positive identification impossible, preventing definitive confirmation that it was Andrea. Police officers on site could not identify the deceased, as her face was unrecognizable and disfigured by the fire. It was only apparent that the remains belonged to a female. The police were unable to lift fingerprints due to severe burns on the hands. Remarkably, the young woman's small dog was still alive. After the firefighters extinguished the flames, the severely burned animal, barely clinging to life, was found near the presumed owner's feet. However, The dog was later euthanized to end its suffering. All residents of the dormitory were relocated to other housing. Meanwhile, repairs commenced on the burned building. The students were understandably frightened, prompting the university to enhance campus security. All students were now convinced that Andrea had indeed died in the fire. Everyone else was accounted for during roll calls, leaving no doubt about the identity of the deceased. Andrea's roommates also insisted they had seen her lying motionless on her bed in the fire-engulfed room, questioning why she hadn't moved to escape the flames. It was speculated that she may have lost consciousness, succumbing to smoke inhalation, or perhaps was already deceased at that point. During this time, Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a trip. Unaware of the tragedy that had befallen their daughter in their absence, they began to grow concerned as she had not been in contact. Unable to reach Andrea, her mother contacted one of her roommates. It was then that her mother learned of the fire and the possibility that Andrea might be its victim. However, police were still unable to confirm the identity of the discovered body, which was classified as Jane Doe. The entire family gathered, praying for their daughter's safety, and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, law enforcement authorities launched a thorough investigation into the incident. Investigators determined that Jessica, Andrea's roommate, was the last person to have spoken with her shortly before the tragedy. Investigators sought to interview Jessica to gather information about their final conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something relevant. Detectives questioned her about the fire's origin, but she was unable to provide any useful information, stating she had seen nothing and did not know how it started. Her testimony proved unhelpful. Sorority friends, also interviewed by investigators, suggested that Andrea might have fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit, leading to an accidental fire. None of them believed the fire was deliberately set, as Andrea had no known enemies. To verify this theory, a comprehensive analysis of the scene was conducted. Electrical appliances and outlets were checked for any signs of short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found. The trash can located at the head of the bed seemed peculiar. Experienced firefighters suspected it might be the origin of the blaze, as it appeared suspicious. Upon questioning friends and sorority sisters, it was revealed that Andrea never slept near the trash can. It was always positioned at the far end of her room and could not have moved on its own. However, identifying the contents of the can was impossible without thorough chemical analysis due to the extensive damage. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called to the scene within 2 hours of the fire being extinguished. By this time, police were already convinced the fire was not accidental. The metal trash can become a key piece of evidence, potentially used to pour flammable liquid and ignite it. The fire, starting at the head of the bed, quickly spread to the ceiling and walls. Forensic analysis corroborated their suspicions. Once it became clear that the fire was intentionally set, the investigation intensified. Forensic investigators discovered a significant amount of bloodstains at the scene, splattered on and around the bed. The majority of these stains survived the fire. Given that her roommates had called out to her upon opening her door, and the initial response that she was unresponsive and lying still, investigators were led to believe she was already deceased before the arsonist set the fire to conceal the evidence. By this point, police had reconstructed a tentative timeline of the fateful evening. They interviewed numerous students, primarily Andrea's roommates. According to them, the group of young women had been socializing on the balcony before returning to the apartment building. The last time Andrea was seen alive was at 5:50 a.m., when her roommate Samantha was leaving for work on campus. Samantha noticed that Andrea was sleeping soundly on the living room sofa. She then left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m. However, Andrea was no longer on the sofa. She had moved to her bedroom. Notably, her bedroom door was closed, which was atypical for her. Samantha found it strange that Andrea would retreat to her room, especially since she had seen her sleeping soundly, and then close the door. This caught Samantha's attention, and shortly thereafter, she noticed the fire. Upon speaking with other students living in the dormitory, police received their first significant lead. A student named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. After dropping her boyfriend off at the airport, she noticed a male silhouette when attempting to open her front door. Although it was a women's dormitory, male visitors were not uncommon. However, what concerned her was that the stranger immediately fled upon her turning around, as if trying to evade her. This encounter unnerved and confused her. According to Sarah's description, the stranger was wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Frightened, she immediately went into her room and secured the door. She promptly texted her boyfriend, describing the suspicious individual. However, Sarah was uncertain if he posed a danger or if she should contact the police. Her boyfriend reassured her, suggesting it was likely someone else's boyfriend and that everything was fine. Consequently, the student decided against raising a wider alarm. Sarah went to sleep, but awoke around 6:15 a.m. to a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog. These sounds emanated from Andrea's room below. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and was usually very calm. She sensed that something was wrong downstairs. Sarah attempted to contact Andrea to ascertain what was happening, but was unable to reach her. She then contacted emergency services at 911. However, her report was met with some skepticism due to the typical student party atmosphere, which often involved loud noises and alcohol. Furthermore, no prior criminal incidents had occurred there. Nevertheless, a patrol car was dispatched to the address. Police arrived at the dormitory for a check around 6:23 a.m., but departed within minutes without informing Sarah of their findings. They had apparently seen nothing suspicious. No male was present, the dog had stopped barking, and no screams were heard. They had only shown flashlights into Andrea's room from outside, without a thorough inspection. The officers concluded that someone might have consumed too much alcohol, leading to an argument, and the dog's behavior could be attributed to that. Meanwhile, Sarah peered out her window, calling down to her downstairs neighbor several times and attempting to reach her by phone, all without success. Sarah also tried contacting other female residents of the building, but it seemed everyone was asleep and no one answered. Sometime after the police departed, she heard a loud bang around 6:45 a.m. She rushed to the balcony and looked down to see thick smoke billowing from below. She also observed the same stranger she had encountered in the stairwell jumping from her downstairs neighbor's balcony. She could hardly believe what she was seeing, and it terrified her. Sarah feared that the young man had harmed Andrea. Grabbing her phone, she called 911, explaining the situation, and then rushed downstairs, where other students were already gathered outside Andrea's room, attempting to open the door. Sarah didn't wait there. She ran outside, trying to track the assailant. She spotted him and pursued him down the street. However, he managed to escape, got into a red Nissan car, and drove away. Sarah recalled another crucial detail. A sticker from one of the university's fraternities was visible on the rear window. Meanwhile, her sorority sisters had managed to force open Andrea's door. The young women called out to her, but she remained unresponsive. The students were adamant they had seen her lying motionless on the bed in the fire-ravaged room. Some also noted the presence of blood on her neck, chest, and shoulder. In desperation, the friends fled the burning building, witnessing the red Nissan driving away, with Sarah in pursuit, relaying the events to the 911 dispatcher. However, none of Andrea's roommates could identify anyone who might have wished her harm. Everyone loved her, and at the time of her death, she was not romantically involved with anyone. Detectives began considering a robbery scenario, but nothing appeared to be stolen from the victim's room. They also explored the possibility that Andrea had met someone on Tinder and the encounter had gone poorly. An offended suitor might have harbored resentment and committed the murder, but this theory lacked corroboration. The most disturbing possibility was that the perpetrator was a random psychopath now roaming the campus. Police reviewed campus security camera footage, but it provided little assistance due to poor image quality, only allowing them to discern the assailant's silhouette. All nearby streets and areas were searched for the red Nissan with the fraternity sticker seen near the crime scene. Police interviewed students, particularly members of fraternities and residents of neighboring buildings. Later, two young men, Nicholas and Mahir, approached the officers. They reported a theft, stating that their laptop and speakers had been stolen. One of them also claimed his keys to a red Nissan car were missing. Suspiciously, all these incidents occurred on the night the young woman died. Furthermore, the apartment that was burgled was located just across the street from the burned dormitory room. The official confirmation that the charred remains belonged to 21-year-old Andrea DelVesco arrived several days after the fire. This identification was made possible through dental records, which were requested from the DelVesco family. An autopsy of the victim's body was conducted on September 22nd. Forensic pathologists determined that at the time of her death, the young woman was wearing only a sports top and no underwear. This led the expert to suspect sexual assault, though this could neither be confirmed nor refuted due to the body's condition. Most of her hair had been burned away, and blood was present on the remaining strands, particularly at the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic pathologists discovered several stab wounds, primarily to the head and neck area, which are determined to be fatal. 5 wounds were identified on the right side of her neck, with 2 more on the left. In total, 19 stab wounds were found on the victim's body. One of these wounds penetrated the carotid artery, leading to rapid death from blood loss. A second potentially fatal wound also severed the carotid artery on the left side. The absence of soot and carbon monoxide in her system confirmed that she had died from stab wounds. She had either already died when the fire started or shortly after ignited. It was clear that the fire was not the cause of her death, but rather a means to conceal the crime. By this point, the investigation had been reclassified as a homicide case. Fear and shock spread throughout the campus. On the day the official forensic findings were released, police managed to track the location of the stolen laptop and speakers, which had been reported missing by other students. Surprisingly, these items were openly being used by a young man named Joseph in Fresno, California, a location over 3 hours away from the crime scene. Law enforcement officers immediately proceeded to the address. It turned out that 2 individuals named Joseph lived there, Macaria and Garcia. Garcia appeared particularly nervous, raising suspicions. He claimed he had borrowed the speakers from his roommates and had done nothing illegal. The situation became increasingly convoluted as the stolen items changed hands. This eventually led the police to Alberto Medina, a 22-year-old student who had borrowed the items from Joseph. Alberto stated that his friends were moving and had given him the items for safekeeping. However, Alberto himself had disappeared, making it impossible to question him. This seemed suspicious, although Alberto had no prior criminal record. He was a typical student studying sociology and psychology at the university. His friends described him as a good person. Police initiated a search for Alberto the following day, September 24th, but he was not apprehended until September 26th. He was arrested and immediately taken in for questioning. Alberto's statements became contradictory. He claimed that on September 18th, he had traveled to California University, where he was vacationing with his friend Eric Marquez. They had spent the weekend socializing and attended a Chris Brown concert. At some point, the 2 attended a party hosted by friends where a laptop and speakers went missing. Under pressure from investigators, the student confessed to stealing the items from these casual acquaintances, citing intoxication and impaired judgment. They returned home around 5:30 a.m. Police noted that the fire had not yet begun at this time. However, when investigators asked if he had seen any suspicious individuals, Alberto revealed something unexpected. He claimed that as they were returning home with the stolen electronics, they were attacked by an unknown assailant wielding a gun. The two fled, and the perpetrator missed, firing shots behind them as they escaped. According to Alberto's description, the attacker was wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt. The assailant's description closely matched the individual Sarah had described, but detectives doubted the veracity of his account. During Alberto's interrogation, he unexpectedly recalled that his friend Eric had visited a blonde, attractive young woman he had met at the party that same weekend and was infatuated with her. Her description and even her name matched Andrea's. Eric's visit was not casual. He intended to be intimate with her. Alberto himself was not present in the young woman's apartment and could not provide details of what transpired there. When Eric returned, he acted strangely and nervously, stating that something had gone wrong, and he had hit her. He urged Alberto to leave quickly. He was wearing plastic bags on his hands, which he later discarded in a trash can, and had a red blanket around his neck, which he then compelled Alberto to carry. The description of the blanket matched the blanket belonging to the murdered young woman. Through his testimony, Alberto directly implied Eric's involvement in Andrea's murder and the subsequent arson. 5 days after the murder, police met with Eric Marquez, a new suspect in the case. He was also 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student. Eric also had no prior legal issues and was considered a good person. His friend Alberto had directed investigators to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, Eric did not confess. He claimed to have spent the entire weekend consuming alcohol and had largely remained at home. Investigators were convinced he was lying, attributing his story to a fabricated alibi. CCTV footage from the young men's residence helped verify their statements. Reviewing the footage revealed that Alberto's account appeared more truthful. The two had been awake from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., wandering outside and entering the apartment multiple times. Alberto was seen wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. Police discovered that Alberto and Eric had left the apartment for an extended period at 4 a.m. Identifying Alberto was straightforward due to a distinctive tattoo on his arm. However, their return to the apartment was the critical moment. Around 7:11 a.m., Alberto returned with his companion. A red blanket belonging to Andrea DelVesco was draped around his neck. The journey to Eric's residence took approximately 5 minutes, consistent with the timing of the arson. The red Nissan car, matching Sarah's description precisely, was also captured on video. Later, at 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric exited the apartment to dispose of trash. Alberto was shirtless, while Eric had changed clothes, a moment captured by the cameras. Despite this evidence, Eric maintained his claim of having no recollection of the events. He suggested they might have gone somewhere together, and his friend Alberto might have entered the dormitory and stolen the blanket, but he had no memory of it. Search warrants were obtained for both young men's apartments, and Eric was arrested. A thorough search of Alberto's hands revealed abrasions and scratches, often indicative of a struggle. No similar injuries were found on Eric's body, leading investigators to believe that Alberto had entered Andrea's room. The red Nissan, used by the alleged perpetrators, was also located and towed. Bloodstains were discovered inside the car on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door. The vehicle contained a significant amount of trash and a single black sock. In the young men's apartment closet, another trash bag was found containing the young men's bloodied clothing, the victim's and suspect's underwear, and a black sock matching the one found in the car. Also discovered were the blood-stained knife and blanket that had been missing from the victim's room. Following all checks, police had accumulated sufficient evidence to file charges. On September 28th, both students were formally charged with murder and burglary. Alberto also faced charges for arson. The young man potentially faced the death penalty. However, the detainees pleaded not guilty. Their families demanded a fair and independent investigation, as they did not believe their children were guilty. Yet, all the evidence pointed against them. The question remained as to who among the arrested individuals was responsible for the murder. Police were able to speak with Joseph Garcia, who had discovered the stolen laptop and speakers. He recounted seeing the young men return home that night. Alberto confided in him about what had actually transpired in the dormitory. Alberto confessed to breaking into Andrea's room, stating he was attracted to her. He had previously seen her walking her dog, which led him to target her. After gaining entry to the dormitory, Alberto grabbed a knife from the student's kitchen, dragged Andrea into the room, closed the door, raped her, and threatened her with a knife. She screamed and resisted fiercely, forcing him to silence her permanently. He killed her and staged the arson to conceal his tracks. Alberto believed he had committed the perfect crime, as he had destroyed all evidence and felt pride in his actions. He had threatened Joseph, which initially led to Joseph's silence. Experts successfully identified DNA evidence. All bloodstains on the perpetrator's clothing and in the vehicle matched Andrea's DNA samples and those of the defendants. Later, another witness emerged. Julio, a cleaner who was tidying the street near the dormitory, saw a young man with a large tattoo on his arm, wearing a black and white t-shirt, exit the red car at night and head towards Andrea's dormitory. Another young man was in the front passenger seat of the car. Both young men appeared intoxicated and were laughing jovially. The tattooed individual seemed aggressive and demanded Julio's assistance in entering the building, but Julio refused to participate and left. Julio observed Alberto ascending the stairs into the building, assuming he lived there, but was unable to enter due to the late hour, thus not attaching significant importance to it. Investigators concluded that Alberto had entered the building, while Eric remained in the car. The blood found in the car on the driver's side also supported this conclusion. The victim's family was shocked by the police's negligent response to Sarah's call. The patrol officers had not even knocked on the young woman's door, even though the perpetrator was allegedly in the room at that moment, committing the murder. The young woman could have potentially been saved. In response, the Los Angeles Police Department stated that the officers involved had been suspended. An internal police investigation was conducted. The negligent conduct displayed by the officers summoned by the victim's neighbor was reviewed by the court. However, the law enforcement officers were acquitted but subsequently dismissed. By the fall of 2016, Eric was tried for aiding and abetting the murder. Alberto was charged with murder, robbery, and arson, while both also faced charges for burglary and animal cruelty, given the dog's injuries in the fire. By September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty for Alberto was still being considered. His lawyers urged him to accept a plea deal for a reduced sentence and to avoid capital punishment, but he refused. The case was divided into two separate trials. As a result of the hearings, Eric received a sentence of just 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to incitement and complicity. It was proven that he had not participated in the murder or arson, having remained in the car throughout the incident. The trial for the primary defendant, Alberto, commenced on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. The evidence against him was compelling, leaving no doubt as to his guilt. Despite this, Alberto did not accept a plea deal with the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, a verdict was reached. Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge ruled against capital punishment, sentencing him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court later added an additional 12 years to his sentence for other charges. The victim's family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, as the perpetrator would never be released and would pose no further threat to society. If you enjoyed this work, please subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. I also recommend watching these videos. Thank you all and goodbye.